Truth is, I am Iron Man.
I solemnly swear that I am up to no good.
What is going on? What are you doing?
To infinity and beyond!
This is the way.
The flux capacitor!
Is Star Wars the one with the little wizard boy?
Chewie, we're home.
Avengers!
Assemble.
Ah, chills. Literal chills.
All right, everyone. Welcome to episode 1 of United We Fan the podcast. Well, I hope your Spidey senses are tingling because for our first episode, we are discussing the Sam Raimi Spider-Man Trilogy. On this amazing episode, I'm joined by my co-host, the brilliant Bryan.
Hey, everyone. Excited to talk about the Sam Raimi Spider-Man Trilogy.
Me too. Full confession, I have a teaser poster for the first and second one. I might be wearing a Spider-Man t-shirt for Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark. And I got a Funko Spider-Man next to my computer. I'm geeking out for this one. But breaking news, we have some breaking news on our first episode. So, Bryan, what's our breaking news?
So just confirmed on Zack Snyder's Twitter feed that the release of the Snyder Cut movement on Twitter has been successful. Those of you that don't know what the Snyder Cut of the movie The Justice League is, very high level. Zack Snyder had done several DC movies after Batman versus Superman was not as well received. Justice League was going through a couple of different things. And then, unfortunately, after a tragic suicide of his daughter in May of 2017, Zack Snyder actually left the Justice League project. And Warner Brothers brought in Joss Whedon of fame of multiple things within nerddom, but especially his most successful had been the Avengers at the time. He came in and cut the film down from a reported 214 minutes to just over 2 hours. That was not met with a lot of applause from the DC fandom. The movie didn't perform very well. It had a $300 million budget and only did $657 million worldwide, which in the world of comic book movies is not good. Comicbook.com is reporting that that Time Warner, AT&T is going to spend $20 million to finish up this Snyder Cut, and it's going to be released on HBO Max sometime in 2021. That's what they're going to do. But Mark, what do you think of the release of the Snyder Cut? Did you like the Joss Whedon cut?
You could tell when Joss stepped in and when Zach couldn't, and they didn't have the same voice, sadly. Justice League, I have a lot of fun with. There's some good stuff there, but it didn't quite meet its potential. So, and I love Zack Snyder. 300 and Watchmen, I'm a big fan of his work. If you've never seen his animated movie, The Legend of Goa'uld, even check that out. So I am beyond excited to check out the Snyder Cut.
Yeah, I think 214 minutes is a bit excessive, to be 100% honest. I don't think I'm going to be able to watch it in one sitting. But
challenge accepted.
I didn't hate Justice League, but when it's trying to go up against something like Avengers Infinity War or something like it plays on a different level. And I think DC's now kind of righted the ship a little bit. I'm a lot more excited for the future of DC than I am the past. But
yeah. Well, I don't think Zach will let us down, so I'm looking forward to it. In other news, for all of you all to get to know Bryan and I better, we do fun little polls on our Facebook social media. Bryan has a fun one where he asks everybody to name their top 4 for their Mount Rushmore. And his most recent one was sports team mascots. Bryan, who's your Mount Rushmore mascots?
Even if you don't like sports, everybody loves a good mascot, I think. I mean, you go to the theme parks around the world and you see a mascot going around and all that. Not necessarily mascots all the time, but so my top 4 mascots that I rated on my Mount Rushmore was the sausages in the Milwaukee Brewers, the ones that run around the warning track.
Yeah.
I will say whenever I'm down, I pull up the YouTube video of that baseball player hitting that sausage with a baseball bat because nobody got hurt and it was funny. But those sausages make me laugh.
Yeah.
The Sun's gorilla. He is the most athletic gorilla on the planet.
God, yeah.
I love watching the Sun's gorilla. Otto the Orange from Syracuse University. He's just a big round orange with a hat on his head. He's just iconic. He's fun to look at. And then newcomer Johnny Come Lately, my favorite mascot of all time already, is Gritty of the Philadelphia Flyers.
So
He's
creepy.
orange and fuzzy, and his eyes move about as if independent from their body. And I love Gritty. A lot of the responses on my Facebook feed, I'm from Denver, so those were real heavy toward those kind of responses. Fred Bird from the St. Louis Cardinals was a big pick, and then a shout out to Puddles, the Oregon Duck mascot, who looks just strikingly like Donald Duck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know I didn't respond because I just tried to think about it, but I always remember the was it the San Diego chicken, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And then
You've got to be a Wally fan, being a Red Sox guy, I would assume.
yeah, Wally is a lot of fun. Yes, thank you for outing me as a Red Sox fan. Even you know what, Stuff from the Orlando Magic, he's actually pretty fun. And then talking about real mascots, I'm not a Georgia Bulldog fan, but Uga the Bulldog.
Oh, Uga's the best.
It's probably one of the cutest mascots there is.
Yeah.
So
I'll never forgive Bevo from Texas for trying to kill Uga at a football game.
oh, I remember that.
Because Uga's the best. So
yeah, that was a scary video. But yeah, if any of you want to become friends with Bryan to vote on that poll, it's a lot of fun. Highly recommend his Mount Rushmore. Over on my social media, I do a kind of like a playoff poll. The most recent one was favorite theatrical live action musical. And the top 5 ended up being Singing in the Rain, which is my favorite musical.
I'm singing in the rain, just singing in the rain.
Second place actually surprised me was The Greatest Showman. Mary Poppins, which I thought would maybe win or come in second, placed third. So the original Mary Poppins. Fourth place was Moulin Rouge, which is in my top 5. And then number 5 is the classic, The Wizard of Oz. Bryan, you have any favorite movie musicals?
I was extremely disappointed when Grease got eliminated from your poll early on.
No.
I love
Grease. Grease ended up in 6. Grease was number 6. Yeah.
Still, it to me, Grease is probably my favorite musical of all time. But coming right on the heels of it for me is The Greatest Showman. I love that movie. That soundtrack is incredible. I can't say I've seen all musicals. I have seen all the musicals that you did list. Obviously, Singing in the Rain holds up a lot. But I love Grease, and The Greatest Showman is a big thing for me. I do like that movie.
So Grease is the word for you. Do you have chills, and are they multiplying, Bryan?
I can't even explain how much that Grease lightning makes me feel.
All right. Well, some fun polls that we'll continue to update you all of you friends, as we do our podcast so that you can find out these exciting results with us. Now back to our main topic, the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy.
Remember, with great power comes great responsibility.
Now, Bryan, there's an alternate version of the second one and an alternate version of the third one. So have you seen all versions of the trilogy movies?
I will say upon my recent rewatch, it was just the theatrical releases. I know I've seen the extended version of the second one and probably the third one at some point.
Mm-hmm.
But I cannot confirm that I've seen all of those. Just the theatrical releases are far more the ones I've watched.
That's okay. I'm going to push up my nerdy glasses as I answer it. I have seen all the versions several times. Definitely worth checking out. Now, it's based on, kind of a very famous comic book series. Bryan, are you a Spider-Man reader?
I didn't read a ton of his stuff when I was a kid. The first Spider-Man stuff I ever read was definitely after I saw this first movie in 2002. But Steve Ditko, Stan Lee, they created one of the most iconic characters of all time. That cartoon from the 90s is really the first Spider-Man I ever saw, and I will never, ever forget that one.
Yeah.
I've been introducing my kids to that one on Disney Plus. That's been a lot of fun. But I didn't read a lot of him before the movie came out.
That's okay. Yeah, I haven't ever read like a regular series of Spidey. I've read graphic novel collections. Definitely more into those. I have read quite a bit. I wouldn't say I have the most expert knowledge. Like, don't call me for trivia on Spider-Man, but I think you and I both have a good range of Spider-Man knowledge when it comes to the movies and the comics. Like, we have a good understanding. So
And I want to acknowledge we understand Tom Holland and Andrew Garfield exist. We will try not to mention them too much because we want to focus on the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films. We will talk about the others at some point, but we understand those other ones exist. But
yeah,
for these purposes, we're talking Tobey Maguire Spider-Man.
who knows? Maybe one day we'll have a Spider-Man episode. So, well, I guess the question is, where do we start? So, Brian, how do you rank the trilogies? Does it go in order for you? 1, 2, 3? Are you like the most popular choice? 2 is your favorite? Where do you stand?
Yeah, two is definitely well regarded as the best of these three, especially critically. But for me, it goes in release order: 1, 2, and then 3. I like the first one the most out of any of them, and I have my reasons for it, and I know we'll talk about that here in a minute. So
Yeah. I mean, I I was writing a movie blog recently, and one of the ones I wanted to compare was Spider-Man 1 versus Spider-Man 2, which one I thought was better. And I actually had to go back and rewatch both of them and really think about it. And depending on the day, Spider-Man 1 can be my favorite. Depending on the day, Spider-Man 2 can be my favorite. Like, honestly, if someone were to go, Mark, which one do you want to watch? I would actually have to think about it, and just, it would be hard for me. I know 3 is the bottom, but it's actually harder for me to decide. But let's start with Spider-Man 1, the one that kicked it all off, the one that introduced us to Tobey Maguire as the webhead, and Sam Raimi leaving those smaller films to do a huge, big budget Spider-Man flick. And it actually opened pretty big, didn't it, Brian?
yeah, so it did come out on a $139 million budget, which is a big budget. I mean, not to say anything, but especially by today's standards, that's a really small budget. But it was the first ever movie to open up to $100 million in its first 3 days, even when you adjust for ticket price inflation. So it was a big deal. It did 114.8 million in its opening weekend, and 407 domestically, and it did $825 million worldwide. So back in 2002, that's a $1.1 billion film by today's standards, which is what the latest Spider-Man films are doing as well. But
Yeah.
it rocked the movie world, and that's why we wanted to do this in our first episode. Is this is the movie that ushered in this new era of films for people like you and me that are our age. That, I mean, this was it. I mean, we saw something we'd never seen before, and
Yeah.
that's why it did that money that quick.
I remember seeing the teaser preview for it where you had Spider-Man swinging around, and it was the song like "I Want to Take You on a Roller Coaster." God, I hope we didn't lose listeners because of me singing, but I just remember seeing that preview, and I was a huge DC guy, like huge DC fan, and I saw this Spider-Man preview, and I got so excited.
To say it's my favorite film of the three, it's not to say that this film isn't without flaws. You watch this movie 18 years later now, and it makes you realize why George Lucas wanted to re-release Star Wars after 20 years, because the special effects have just come such a long way. There's a lot lacking by today's standards in the special effects, but some of it holds up really well. The reason I picked Spider-Man 1 over Spider-Man 2 is just the storyline it had with its characters. I think it knew who its characters were, and it didn't deviate from it. Spider-Man, Peter Parker was always chasing after Mary Jane Watson. It never was the other way around. And then in Spider-Man 2, they kind of flipped that role, and Mary Jane's chasing Peter more than Peter's chasing her. And that's not what Spider-Man was to me. They did a good job this is the best on-screen showing of the spider sense. I love how they show the spider senses, everything in slow motion and all that kind of stuff. And they nailed that from movie 1.
Yeah.
They had Flash Thompson is the big bully, and then Peter beats him up. It got high
What a good
school. It
scene.
got high school really, really, really well for all things considered for the time compared to what they were doing with most high school movies back in that time frame.
Yeah. And I mean, I'll forgive Tobey Maguire because he said he never read a Spider-Man comic book before doing this movie. I'll forgive him for that because he just does a great job. And I mean, even if you watch his screen test, if you can see special features, you'll see why they picked him. He nailed it right away for me. So, and then, well, let's talk about one thing they changed. They don't have web shooters. They have it be organic, that it comes from Peter. You have any thoughts on that change? Like, do you prefer web shooters or having it come from him instead?
Having it come from him is very, very disturbing. I think that's the best word that comes to it. But I will say that it delivered one of my favorite lines that I remember from laughing as a kid, of the "Go Web Go" and "Fly"
Yes.
and all that kind of stuff. And
Shazam! Fly!
that stuff, it never ceases to make me laugh. I don't. I mean, I very much prefer the web shooters.
Yeah.
But again, if you're starting from square one, we got to remember that there's people that are seeing Spider-Man in 2002 that had no basis for the character whatsoever. Now, when we see
Right.
Spider-Man, we've got the basis of these movies and the others. But I prefer the web shooters personally.
Yeah. And I mean, other than that, I think they definitely nailed it. The suit is beautiful for his like first big screen.
The suit is gorgeous.
It is beautiful. Speaking of beautiful, we have to talk about Bruce Campbell and his cameo. It wouldn't be a Sam Raimi movie without Bruce Campbell being the ring announcer, who actually gives Spider-Man his name.
Yeah, we'd be calling him the Human Spider if it wasn't for Bruce Campbell, and that just doesn't work for me. So,
oh God! And then of course, the Human Spider is going against Randy Macho Man Savage as Bonesaw. Bruce Campbell, he comes into an appearance in all three movies. Is this one your favorite? Where does this rank for the Bruce Campbell cameos for you?
as far as the Bruce Campbell himself, this is probably kind of my favorite, but I am very partial to the Bruce Campbell cameo as the maitre d' at the restaurant trying to help Peter propose to MJ, where he keeps getting the cross signals and all that kind of stuff, because his French accent and his little skinny French mustache, it's just hilarious. So I would say of the Bruce Campbells, the stuffy usher at the play in the second one is the most forgettable for me, and even there it's pretty darn funny. So
see, for me, I was gonna say I think this one, like, don't get me wrong, I love all three. This one's probably my least, just because like it's low key Bruce Campbell. I love him, but the second one is actually my favorite, where he's the usher. They extended it for one of the cuts of the second movie, but I like how simple it was, how this theater usher actually defeats Spider-Man. The third one, I think, is my second favorite, just because we get over the top Bruce Campbell, and I love it. But for me, Campbell cameos, it goes 2, 3, 1. So, Speaking of ranking, we have the very talented Willem Dafoe as Spider-Man's first villain, the Green Goblin. Where does he rank as far as your Spider-Man trilogy villains? Is he your first, second, third, fourth, fifth?
I can, again, kind of like the first and second movie, I can go back 1, 2 on him. As a villain, specifically as a full character, I think Norman Osborn, Willem Dafoe was just perfect. I think him playing both the good Norman guy, somewhat of a scientist himself, if you will. I think the full character, he's probably my favorite villain. Doc Ock, we'll talk about a little bit more in a bit. Yeah. He's probably my favorite villain, but I don't care much for the character of Otto Octavius. So,
yeah, I got to go with the Green Goblin. Willem Dafoe is my favorite villain from the trilogy. Just with his backstory and just how it's portrayed, and just the character in general. I just when I always get excited reading about the Green Goblin and the Spider-Verse. Can't go without touching on the upside down kiss in the rain, the iconic scene that I'm reading about. It was not fun to film, but pretty cool scene, especially in the movie. It definitely came off very comic booky.
Yeah, it comes across super comic booky, and that's what they were going for. And I mean, I will say that it doesn't seem like it would be very easy, especially to film in the rain. So, and we got to touch on Uncle Ben. I love just the performance of Uncle Ben, and all that kind of stuff. I don't really love how they kind of retcon it to an extent in Spider-Man 3. Retcon's not quite the right word, but expand on it, I guess. I just think the character of Uncle Ben and what he meant to Peter was something that really means a lot to people. It helped people realize that, hey, family isn't always just mom and dad. It can be other people. And I mean, yeah.
I definitely love the casting choices for Uncle Ben and Aunt May. I love them in the first movie. So Spider-Man 2, what a lot of people consider to be their favorite and the best of the trilogy. But for you and me, it falls into a close second. So we have Spider-Man versus Doc Ock, played by Alfred Molina, who is also very talented. You weren't too sold on him. Where does he rank for you in the villain rankings?
It's not that I wasn't sold on him. I did have a hard time kind of with him just as Otto Octavius. He just seems a little bit distant, but that very well may have been a character development choice. I mean, he's kind of an awkward scientist, and that's kind of how he is. The fact that he can just at the very end of the movie choose to overcome, spoiler alert, choose to overcome the artificial intelligence of the arms and then just choose to kind of save the day. It doesn't always sit right with me. I think if he had that conviction at that point, he could have had that conviction earlier in the movie too. And that's kind of why I would probably rank him only as second, because visually he's just awesome to look at. It's really fun to watch.
Definitely. Yeah, I remember the teaser preview where you have Tobey Maguire and Kirsten Dunst in like that cafe, and they're talking, and then just something starts to go wrong, and the scene's obviously in the movie, and then that car just comes through the window, and you have Doc Ock there, and he's just incredibly intimidating, threatening to pick Mary Jane apart. It was just a really good scene. Gave me goosebumps, still gives me goosebumps, and then he gives her like a little smile after he throws poor Peter Parker against the wall. I think he's a really good villain. I do agree it was a little easy, him turning. But
I wish they had put more of a costume on him rather than just a trench coat being shirtless. I would have liked to see him kind of get a full blown, more green type of costume. But I know they went green in the first one with the Green Goblin. So, but traditionally he is green, and he's the best in the Spider-Man PlayStation 4 game. He is far and away the funnest villain to play against too. So,
I definitely think as far as fight scenes, the fights between Doc Ock and Spider-Man are, I think, better than they were in the first film. I do love them. So, like, you have the bank heist, and then on top of the train, that whole chase scene, I think is pretty great between Ock and Spidey. We have a very vintage Sam Raimi scene in that movie as well, with the surgeons, the poor surgeons, trying to get the tentacles off of Doc Ock, and it doesn't go so well.
Oh, that scene is perfect Sam Raimi, just horror. That just the close-ups that you get of the different surgeons and the dismemberment that's happening that you don't even see.
Yeah.
The Sam Raimi and the future of Sam Raimi, this scene is what I look at when we look at Sam Raimi directing the next Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness movie.
Yeah.
I want that movie to get weird, and I want it to get scary. And this scene, I think, is going to be the basis of what we have to look at in the future with a Marvel Studios budget.
I just, that movie, that scene there is a horror movie scene, and it even, like, for all those people who would forget or don't know, he did the Evil Dead movies, and you're reminded by that surgery scene, oh yeah, this guy did horror movies. Oh yeah, for sure. So,
Yeah,
and
one
then
last thing I want to say about Spider-Man 2
yeah,
is why I don't rank it the first one. The character of MJ being so flippant with her relationship between John Jameson and Peter, and just being able to say, yeah, I'll marry a guy, and then flip on it. I mean, Mary Jane frustrates me in that movie, and she's just a completely different character than she was in the first movie, and that's kind of my thing. Shout out to J.K. Simmons, though, in this movie. He really came into his own as J. Jonah Jameson.
yep,
And we even get our first Doctor Strange call out in this movie when he says he wants to name Doc Ock Doctor Strange, but it's already taken.
yep,
And that just more potential for Sam Raimi in the future there.
yep. And shout out to him for also, in a deleted scene, wearing the Spider-Man suit and jumping on his desk. If you get a chance, check out that scene. I can see why it was deleted, but it is comedic gold. And then I'm going to also do a little shout out. In the beginning of the film, while Peter's in the pizza parlor, there's a shot of Dr. Pepper Red Fusion. I miss that drink. Dr. Pepper, if you ever listen to our podcast, please bring that back. I love you, Dr. Pepper. Red Fusion. Think about it. All right. Moving on to Spider-Man 3, the movie that just didn't feel organized, and Sam Raimi had his hands full, and he was overruled on several decision making, especially with the villains. So in this one, we get Sandman and Venom, with Harry being a half a villain, sort of. So
Yeah, he comes in as the new Goblin. Now, this movie did perform. It did 151 million in its opening weekend. So I mean, it had a big appetite when it came out. It also had a budget of much higher than all the other ones, but it pulled in $900 million worldwide. So this movie performed well. But it's easy to tell when you watch these three why it's the worst of them. Like you said, it's just disjointed. It has so many pacing challenges when Venom takes over Peter's body, and I mean, everybody's seen it. He dances through the streets and he rolls his arms, and it just the entire pacing of those 30 minutes just do not fit this film at all.
there's no way we could have talked about this movie without the dancing scene, and I love that Into the Spider-Verse even did a little remembrance to that.
My son was watching these movies with me, and right when he rolled his arms, my son said, "Yeah, we don't talk about that."
Yeah,
And it was just perfect. So
yeah, and I mean, this movie isn't all bad. The opening, it's not the opening scene. In the early scene, there's a battle between Peter Parker and Harry, where Harry's on the hoverboard and they're flying around the city. It's actually a pretty epic scene. Yeah, some of the effects are a little dated, but overall scene, it's actually a great little action scene.
it actually, compared special effects wise, it's one of the better scenes in this trilogy. It's a lot of fun.
And then I remember I rewatched it yesterday. The Sandman creation scene where he's coming together with the music, and the effects don't look bad at all. You can tell they spent a lot of time on it. The creation of Sandman, and then when he's reaching out for the locket, that's actually a pretty good scene.
Yeah, all the sand just collapsing around it. It's really really cool.
Yeah,
I just don't love we didn't get enough. We still don't get much of an explanation as to why he killed Ben Parker. And that's when I talk about that being a retcon. It just kind of added to the story something I didn't want. This character just didn't have a lot of depth to it. They were just looking for a way to. I think this movie just had too many villains. Venom shows up and we get zero explanation where the symbiote ever comes from. It's just too much trying to fit into 2 hours and 20 minutes.
Yeah, I think it was a little weak that they had Sandman accidentally kill Uncle Ben. I think that was a little weak storytelling. I think Tom Thomas Hayden Church is very talented, and I think he did the best he could with the Sandman character. Topher Grace as Venom. I didn't hate him like a lot of feedback I've heard. I think he could have gone a little more over the top for Venom.
He was already kind of over the top. I mean, he prays to have Peter Parker killed before Venom even has any influence on him. He's not exactly Eddie Brock's not exactly a good guy in the first place, and
that's true.
I think he's a little bit.
That church scene. Ooh,
that church scene's crazy.
I forgot all about that.
Now, if you could get fired for photoshopping photos in today's world, man, holy cow!
And then I will admit Gwen Stacy is one of my like comic book crushes. Nothing against Bryce Dallas Howard. I didn't like her portrayal. She's definitely not the definitive portrayal for me of Gwen Stacy. That kind of bummed me out how they portrayed her in the movie, but it was nice to see Gwen Stacy pop up on screen.
Captain Stacy too, her dad, he wasn't, I mean, they just kind of put him in there just to put him in there. I wish that we had gotten more of a Commissioner Gordon role, if you will. Yeah,
they were both better utilized in future installments of other Spider-Man, I think. In this film, I'm going to put on my movie score hat for a quick second. Danny Elfman did an iconic score. Granted, it may not be as like epic, legendary as his Batman and Batman Returns scores, but you hear this score and you know Spider-Man like is coming. Shout out to Danny Elfman for his score, and I know he had some creative differences on the third one. So Christopher Young, who's actually done some good stuff, came in, and for me, I liked his contributions. He also blended very well with Danny Elfman. They worked together for a little bit. So, and he's worked with Sam Raimi before. So if you get a chance, check out those movie scores. I think all three of them hold up very, very well. Bryan, you have any thoughts on the Spider-Man theme for this one?
Like you said, the Danny Elfman, the first two, they stand out a lot more than the music in the third one does. In the second one, they start playing the traditional Spider-Man theme song, and they don't steer into that near as much as I think they would now. Even Marvel Studios pulled it out in Spider-Man: Homecoming, their very first one. Right. But I think it was a creative choice not to steer into that too much, and maybe it was the right choice because maybe it's all we would think about now. But I wish they had used that classic Spider-Man theme song just a little bit more. Yeah,
but speaking of songs, I definitely owned all 3 CDs for the movie albums. Takes Me Back, all 3 of them. Did you happen to listen to any of those albums? Or am I alone on this one?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with these ones. I know they had a lot of rock music and stuff on them that wasn't necessarily in the movie, right?
They use them. If you check out the albums, you go, oh yeah, I remember hearing a clip of that. Like the second one, they definitely used music from the album a lot more heavily. But if you get a chance and you want to hit rewind a little bit, check out those albums. They're still pretty good rockin' stuff. We were supposed to get a Spider-Man 4 after this with Sam Raimi hoping to rebound after this one, but sadly didn't happen. I know I've even seen some like fan-made films hoping to be inspired by the Spider-Man 4 script that came out. Everything I've read on it, it sounds like it would have been pretty epic. I would have definitely been there for it. I'm sad it didn't happen, but yeah, it is what it is, I guess. So,
does Tobey Maguire coming back as old man Spider-Man say they do a live action Spider-Verse? And because the main Spider-Man that dies in Spider-Verse is based on Tobey Maguire's character. Would you like to see something like that portrayed on live action film to bring Tobey Maguire back to the role?
I think Tobey Maguire, I think he's done. I think we've moved on. We've all had enough time to move on. I do hope that the original pitched cameo for all the Spider-Mans to appear in the animated Into the Spider-Verse movie. I hope that happens. But I'm good with never seeing a live action Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movie. That time has come and gone, sadly.
That's fair.
But yeah. Well, do you have any more closing thoughts before we wrap up this episode on the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy?
No, I'm glad we did this. I've been meaning to watch those films over again a lot lately, and it brings me back to the time when I just was a kid and I sat in that audience, and that elevator scene in Spider-Man 2 when he rides it down because he can't shoot his webs. I remember that scene and that movie audience. I can tell you the exact movie theater I was in, and that audience was just dying. And that scene is still one of the funniest ones out there. But sure, these films may not be what we have now, especially with Spider-Man on film. Spoiler alert to how I feel about Tom Holland. I love Tom Holland. But these films, ushered in this new age, and it made me the nerd I am today. This movie, it really started in 2002 with this first Spider-Man movie.
Yeah. I definitely got into Spider-Man after seeing this. I still have my hoodie that I got after seeing the third one. So I definitely have a special place for these movies, and I think if people went back and watched, they would be reminded just how much fun and how good these were. Thank you all for uniting with us on our podcast. We hope your Spidey senses went off for the whole entire episode, and you'll continue to listen to us in the future.
You can find us on Instagram at United We Fan the Podcast with underscores in between. We're on Instagram there. You can also send us your feedback on anything you like that we talked about, anything you'd like to hear us talk about in the future. We do have an email address at unitedwefanpodcast@gmail.com.
Till next time, we hope you all assemble to unite with us for our next episode of United We Fan the Podcast. We'll be taking on the epic maestro that is Steven Spielberg. Pretty excited, huge fan of his. I'm excited. For Bryan, for myself, thank you all for listening. Keep on, have fun.
Fly! Up and away!